It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Grizzlies-Thunder tonight. We'll, of course, preview that big contest for the Memphis Grizzlies. Plus, Vince Williams Jr. looking very much like he might be starting to get back into the swing of things, how much that could help the Grizzlies. We're going to lead off, though, with all the folks in Memphis being so serious. Heath Ledger is the Joker style. Why so serious, Memphis Grizzlies fans? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax. It's always a good day when we get to say one of your hosts because that means the dynamic duo rides once more. Damichael Cole, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, there in Memphis with me. So happy to have you with us wherever you're checking out the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. It is all good. And also make sure you check out our free daily newsletter, lockedondaily.com. Grizzlies words from me, NBA analysis, fantasy basketball advice, and so much more. Lockedondaily.com. Subscribe today if you haven't already done so. Again, lockedondaily.com. Damichael, I listen to the show as I always do when I'm not on, and you did a phenomenal job as you always do. You're just wonderful. You know that, of course.
Appreciate you, Joe.
Well, at least
Likewise.
You know that I uncomfortably enjoy your work. Like maybe I take it a little too far. But anyway, you did a great job. And I listened to your show and I watched the second half because, again, everydayers know I'm very washed. So these later West Coast starts, I wake up at 5 a.m. every day and run or walk, get some sort of exercise.
You really missed the good part.
I did. Yeah. I went to bed like, oh, they're back in the game. Good for them. And then they beat the absolute dog poop out of Utah in the second half. Now, Desmond Bane and Santi Aldama got into it a little bit. You talked about it on the show yesterday. We won't rehash it because I wrote about it.
I did want to see. Oh, yeah.
I wrote about it for the newsletter. And I, to be honest with you, good. Like at this stage, I'm glad.
I think we could both agree on that. Yeah,
I'm glad that they're fighting, to be honest with you, because the thing that's worse, I'm not trying to say that violence is the answer because it's not.
No, it's not.
The reason I'm saying good is because what's worse than that is apathy. And what have you and I been talking about? It's like they're just accepting it. It's like they're just okay with what has been happening to them. That was not okay, what was happening to them last night. And that's a good thing. So that's what I mean by good. Hopefully it doesn't linger. I don't think it will. To me, it gave off the vibe of two guys just competing and, somebody making a mistake. Dez kind of has a reputation of being that guy with Santi in particular, but in general, kind of, checking guys when they're not doing their jobs. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's a competitor. And again, I don't have inside information. Desmond Bane didn't tell me that. Just from watching him play, that is the vibe I've gotten from Desmond Bane. So I think it's much ado about nothing. But I posed this question on X, and I think you said I got 60 replies to it last we looked.
You talking about me, man. You the content magnet around here.
I tell you what, and people get fired up. And I thought this was a pretty simple question. Grizzlies fans are unhappy even after 37-point wins where Ja Morant does not play. This is at Joe Mullinax on X, by the way. Honest question, what would it take for you to be happy? So, Damichael, obviously, you're the beat writer for the team. Your answer to this is going to be a little bit different than the fan perspective that I bring a little bit more directly. But I'm curious, you watched the whole game. Obviously, it's literally your job. And you saw that team after I watched the second half yesterday morning completely and utterly dominate the Utah Jazz. They embarrassed, obliterated, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies were 10 or 11-point favorites going into the contest. Didn't have Ja Morant, didn't have Brandon Clark. Won the game by 37 points. If they were supposed to win by 37 points, again, I know we live in a sports gambling world, but if they were supposed to win by 37 points, guess what the line would have been on FanDuel? Minus 37. So I think that we are at this place as Memphis Grizzlies fans, and some of the folks in my X comment said this. New York Knicks fans got a hold of my tweet. Apparently, Knicks fans are going through the same experience.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Where there's games that they're supposed to win and they dominate, right?
Yep.
And then the games against the quote-unquote good teams, they lose, and it puts fans in a place where they feel like they're in a purgatory of contendership. I'm curious as to your takeaway on that, because when the way that I perceive this team now, through the lens of post-All-Star break, after the Marcus Smart trade, and the realization that Marcus Smart was a negative asset. Now, you can argue, since he was a negative asset, keep him around and see if he become positive. You've talked about that before. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for here. They made the decision to move on from him, right? They are roughly a couple of games under 500 since the trade deadline. They are what their record says they are. So when you win a game by 37 points, I'm freaking ecstatic. Looking at social media, there were a lot of folks that were not ecstatic. Where do you kind of land on that spectrum?
Well, there's a quote. Rest in peace, Uncle Ben. You know who Uncle Ben is? Your Spider-Man guy? Yeah. He said, with great power comes great responsibility. And how that applies to this situation is they've won 56 games a couple years ago. They won 51 games. They've been the number 2 seed. People don't care about that stuff anymore. That's irrelevant now. I mean, getting the number 2 seed would be cool. It'll be cute or whatever. People aren't going to, the year they lost to Golden State, people were okay with that season. They lost in the first round. People didn't like it against the Lakers, but it wasn't the end of the world. But none of that is good enough anymore. There's greater power and there's greater responsibility because the guys are older. You're expecting, that the money invested in this core and you're expecting the results. This is why the results haven't shifted from what they were a couple years ago. And people are kind of, fed up with Taylor Jenkins at this point because it looks the same, from a result standpoint. But yeah, you pointed it out with the Knicks in the simplest form, Joe. It's just that people know that the season's going to come to an end soon, right? And they don't feel good about this team's chances of winning a championship. And it's like, they just, we're just going to the, the inevitable first round loss or ugly second round losses on the way. Like if they get to the second round, they're probably going to get destroyed. And if they play the wrong team in the first round, they're probably going to get bounced in the first round. And that's not enough in Memphis anymore. People want to see this team get to a West Conference Finals, win some games. People want to see this team even go further than that. It's just as simple as that, Joe. You have Ja Morant, one of the most dynamic point guards in the NBA. We've seen Jaren Jackson Jr. take this leap. We've seen Desmond Bane become a better player than he ever was before. And you won 56 games with those 3.
Yeah, but here's where I'll disagree with you. And we rarely disagree. But here's where I'll disagree with you. You said something there that the Memphis Grizzlies have Ja Morant.
Yeah.
I would argue they do not have Ja Morant. Okay? Not only do they not have Ja Morant literally in terms of all the games that he has missed, they do not have the same Ja Morant that they had 2 years ago. Now, we can probably do a whole series of
this March version of him is averaging 31 now.
How many games?
It's only been 6 games. It's 6 games.
6 games in March. How many games have they played in March as a team?
All right, Joe. I'm picking it up.
Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
I'm picking it up.
So if he's on the court and one of those games that reached that 31-point average was a 44-point shellacking in a loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers that I was there for. I was there with you in Memphis for that game. So, and it's not a knock on Ja. Clearly, there is concern enough about this hamstring that they are being very cautious with it. So
you don't want him missing playoff
games. You don't. So I am not so much mad that he's not playing. The point that I'm trying to make is you said they have Ja. I would argue they do not.
And that's fair.
And they also have, as I've said a couple of times now, a starting wing in Jalen Wells, who 2 years ago was superstar Ja Morant for an extended period of time. He was playing basketball at Sonoma State, who, if I'm not mistaken, just shut down their athletic department or is in the process of doing so, unless there's been some donations that I've missed in recent weeks. So I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. I'm just trying to make the point that context matters. You don't have Ja Morant the way that you once did. You don't have Brandon Clark. 2 years ago, you had guys and Steven Adams and Dylan
You don't
Brooks.
trust Ja Morant in the playoffs right now?
What has he?
The fourth quarter?
I trust him if he can be on the court.
Fair enough.
I trust him if he can be on the court. But what has he shown this season? He hasn't played more than 6 games consecutively at all.
That's fair.
There's 7 games in a playoff series.
I'm with
so
you.
if we're going off of a
That's my
larger
question
sample
too.
size,
Yeah.
he's going to miss a playoff game. And if they miss a playoff game against the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Clippers, it doesn't matter. They're going to lose. That's the thing. If they have, even with Clark out, and I like Brandon Clark, shout out to Modern Medicine. Even with Clark out, if they have a healthy Ja Morant, they can beat anybody in the Western Conference except the Oklahoma City Thunder in a 7-game series. I believe that completely.
Yeah.
Heart of hearts, hand to whatever gods may be. If Ja is healthy, they can run with anyone except the Thunder, who we'll talk more about later in the show. But they don't have Ja right now. And it's hard for me to envision that being the case when it hasn't really been the case all season long.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think, it's simple as it all boils down to the results. And people have seen, I think last I checked, the Grizzlies are 11-19 against the top teams. 11-19.
It's not good.
I think the Nuggets have the next worst record of the top teams, and they're 13-18 against that group. So you're talking about there is not a prolonged success against these top tier teams. You know, we talked about Oklahoma City here in a few. They haven't beat Oklahoma City yet. Houston, the number 2 seed, they're 1-3. You know, against them. We'll see how they look against Denver and LA here in the next couple weeks. So look. It's very fair to feel like this team's ceiling is not probably a second round loss, ugly loss, or whatever the case may be. And it's also fair to want more than that. You should want more than that. The Grizzlies have identified their core. When you identify your core, the results should get better from that point, because you're basically saying these are the guys that we want to build around. And that's the case in Memphis. You have your guys. So, you know, something's got to change, and people have that urgency, and I'm fine with it.
You have 2/3 of your guys. Right, and I'll continue to make that point. Once Ja plays 6 games in a row, I'll stop saying it. And again,
it ain't that many left. I mean,
don't want to mess with a hamstring. Not disputing that. I'm not calling Ja soft in any way, shape, or form. I don't need any angry comments or most social media messages. The durability question, I don't understand how it wouldn't be a fair one at this point. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will talk more about somebody whose durability has also been questioned this year, but he looked pretty good against the Jazz. Vince Williams Jr. is the bug back. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here. The Sweet 16 kicks off tonight. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, although I don't think Arkansas and John Calipari can really count as a Cinderella, but we'll go with it this year. And even who's cutting down the nets. There aren't really underdogs beyond Arkansas, but maybe Maryland makes a miracle run or something like that. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Tournament games are happening every day the rest of the week and weekend. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around. So what are you waiting for? Go visit FanDuel.com right now and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Go check them out. All right, Damichael, again, you did a great job on the show yesterday. Vince Williams Jr. did a great job in his game a couple of days ago against the Utah Jazz. Was a major piece of that explosive run for the Grizzlies. I think he was a plus 31 or something like that. And single game plus minus is a flawed stat. Lots of different reasons for points that could be super boring to talk about on a podcast, especially by a fat, balding white guy. There's lots of podcasts that do that. I am going to avoid that conversation and just kind of, again, my eyes, watching him get more comfortable. You've said numerous times that Vince Williams has told you that when he's back, you'll see him dunk. I don't recall any dunks against the Utah Jazz. So maybe still not there for the VCU product. But it was good to see him hit some threes, which he's really struggled with. That tells me maybe there's a little bit more bend in that ankle, bend in the leg. He's getting his legs back under him a little bit, getting his cardio. The defense even looked a little bit more crisp in terms of his movement. If Vince Williams Jr. continues this progression, obviously they don't have Gigi Jackson because of his issues coming off of the injury. They have another 10 games or so to keep getting something close to the Vince Williams Jr. they saw against the Jazz. That guy, in my opinion, hasn't proven it like Brandon Clark yet, but he's going to get the chance here soon. He's a 16-game player. like Draymond Green has talked about, others have talked about. I see Vince Williams Jr. as a guy, his numbers aren't going to knock your socks off, but that's a dude that can be on a championship winning team and have a role. That guy made an appearance against the Jazz. I know the Jazz are bad, but compared to what Vince Williams Jr. had been doing, that was probably the best game of his season so far.
Man, we've talked about it a lot, me and you both. Before the season, this was one of my key players to determining the ceiling for this Grizzlies team. This is the same guy when I was talking to him before the season. He said his goal is to be on the all defensive team. That's kind of what he thinks of himself. But this is also the same guy who's very, fair and, in critiquing his play. And he's talked about, the build up and not all being all the way there, but being, healthy enough to play and kind of build up towards, the player that he knows he can be. The Jazz game was good considering some of the things that particularly he did on the offensive end, knocking down some 3-pointers. His 3-point shot hasn't been, what we're used to. I'm not worried about it. Again, my saying, Joe, I'm always going to the back of the baseball card. This is a guy that shot the ball well pretty much for the most of his college career. This is a guy that shot the ball well, in the G League, and even last season. He shot the ball well at the NBA level for the Grizzlies. So I have no reason to believe all of a sudden he's just some bad 3-point shooter. The numbers will round out for him. So I'm sure, the 3-pointers, that's more kind of, indicative of what he can be on the offensive end. Defensively, I'm not ready to say he's back yet. And quite frankly, that's what matters most to me. I don't care too much about it, what he can do on the offensive end. They'll need him to knock down some of those threes from time to time. We see, teams are starting to do some lazy closeouts on Vince Williams, which, is going to affect some of the driving lanes for Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., those guys. So he's going to need to, keep teams honest by knocking that shot down. And that's something he's been capable of doing. But the number one contributing factor to how important he is to this team is his perimeter defense. We talk a lot about the help defense and, people say, oh, the Grizzlies give up all these open 3-pointers. Look, I'm with you. At the end of the day, I completely agree. It is way too many and it needs to be fixed. But at the same time, if you really think about it, the reason that they're giving up a lot of these open 3-pointers is because they don't have a lot of guys who can just keep a player in front of them. Like, guys just drive past the Grizzlies players. Sometimes it's not without, some type of resistance. Some players are just that good. But they don't have a lot of guys who just have the ability to kind of stonewall guys from, driving to the basket. Vince Williams has that capability. Look, the game against the Utah Jazz, all due respect to the Utah Jazz, I don't see a player over there that I'm thinking about and saying, oh, that's the type of player the Grizzlies are going to need Vince Williams Jr. to guard in the playoffs. So I want to see it when you see Jalen Williams, when you see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, those type of guys. Because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to test out your lateral agility. When he looks like he's driving to the basket, and then he comes right to a full stop, and you got to be right there. And then he does the little side step, and then he keeps his dribble alive, and he steps back, and your lateral agility will be attested. So I want to see it in that type of matchup. I want to see it when you potentially could run into, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown here in a few days, Luka Doncic, LeBron James. That's what it's going to come down to for me, how he moves on the defensive end, how impactful he is. We're seeing a better version of him, but we haven't seen that, that gritty, knocking the ball out of guys' hands. He's picking up full court a little bit more. I've noticed that. But we haven't just seen the complete grittiness like last season when he was guarding Luka and KD and completely, wrecking those games in a way.
I'm excited to watch him continue to grow. Obviously, there's a 2 back-to-back coming up here in the next few games. I think it's the Celtics and the Warriors is a back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be an interesting test of him to see because he hasn't really played many back-to-backs so far this year, if I recall. So it'll be interesting to see the health of that ankle. For the reasons that you just outlined, they need a point of attack defender. If they're going to have a chance, forget the Thunder in a potential second round series. Mm-hmm. If they're going to keep Jalen Green in front of them, if they're going to keep the Lukas and LeBrons and, the Jamal Murrays, go up and down the list, Steph Curry, regardless of who that first round opponent's going to be. Because I don't think, I wrote about this earlier in the week for the newsletter. I don't see Memphis falling below 6. I think that is the floor for them. Obviously it's possible that they fall to 7 or 8, but I just don't think that'll occur. It's much more likely they're in that 3, 4, 5 range. I believe that regardless of who they play, they need someone that's going to be able to take on that assignment for at least half of the game and give other guys like Bane a breather. And that's got to be Vince Williams Jr. at this stage. I'm not quite sure who else it would be. So
I got a hot take
it'll
for
be
you.
important these last 10 or so games getting ready for the postseason.
You ready for my hot take? I believe at some point.
I would love to hear it.
I believe at some point that Vince Williams will have to, if you're talking about this team being at its best version, you'll need Vince Williams playing more minutes than Jalen Wells. That's my hot take.
Oh, I don't think that's a hot take at all. I mean, you and I, before the season started, Vince Williams Jr. was our starter, right? He was our guy. It was supposed to be Ja, Dez, and Vince Williams Jr. there. So I think that hopefully he's able to come back along. That might be a hot take to others given the season that Jalen Wells has had, but I think it's pretty clear Wells needs to, as well as Zach Edey did coming off the bench. And again, I've complained about that, but he looked good against the Jazz. I think it's time to give Wells that same kind of treatment, but you need to see Vince Williams Jr. being able to do what he did against the Jazz against heightened competition like the Thunder. Let us know on X at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax, how you're feeling about the bug, Vince Williams Jr. Is he ready to get back out there and be that X factor for Memphis? When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll close out this episode previewing Grizzlies-Thunder, a stretch of really tough games for Memphis starting tonight. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Damichael, it is the last road game of this 5-game trip for Memphis. They're in Oklahoma City tonight to take on the Thunder. The Thunder injury report is as follows. Cason Wallace is questionable. Jalen Williams is questionable. Wallace with a knee, Williams with a hip. Aaron Wiggins is out due to Achilles tendonitis. And then there's several other injuries, including A.J. Mitchell. But obviously the big guys, SGA, Chet, Hartenstein, they are all in the mix for the Thunder. For the Grizzlies, we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, Ja Morant still out for Memphis. Lamar Stevens seems to be progressing towards a return. He's questionable for the game, but they're still obviously without Ja, still, of course, without Brandon Clark as well. Damichael, I'm curious, obviously a major step up in competition, no denying that. The Thunder, arguably the best team in the NBA, certainly the best team in the Western Conference, and the Western Conference is the best conference in the NBA. How are you feeling going into this game? It's one that the Thunder are going to be favored potentially by double digits, but certainly will be favored. How do the Grizzlies pull off the upset here and find a way to knock off OKC? If they beat the Thunder, that cancels out one of the bad losses from earlier on this road trip.
Yeah, man, I got a lot to say about
Let's
this.
Hear it.
But we'll start here. We'll break it down into pieces. And you know how I like to dive into the matchups. And what we're probably going to have in this game is Santi Aldama and Jaren Jackson Jr. This is going to be the first time that the Grizzlies get an extensive look at Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren sharing the floor together. Really interested to see how that plays out with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor. We haven't seen that. And that's kind of something that, I wanted to see. We've seen Jaren in the course of his career go against Chet. We've seen him go against Isaiah Hartenstein. We have not seen Jaren drive the ball to the basket and have one of them guarding him and the other one potentially protecting the rim. So Santi's ability as that floor spacer is going to be very, pivotal. If Zach Edey ends up, playing, a bigger role, Jay Huff, however they decide to do that, either being a floor spacer or being an impactful player, in Zach Edey's case with his physicality, if they put Hartenstein on him, attacking the glass and things like that, that front court battle is going to be a telling one because, honestly, if Brandon Clark was available, I don't think this is the type of game that really fits, his playing style. So to speak, at least on the offensive end. Defensively, he's perfect because you're going to need switchable defenders against this OKC team that likes to throw a lot of different guys at you. So that is, quite frankly, with Jaren Jackson Jr., right? 2-time All-Star now. He was the Grizzlies' lone All-Star. It's games like this where you want him to kind of rise up because, on paper, this is going to be his toughest task of the season. He's going to be, one of his toughest. It's going to be right up there with going against Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. I think that's probably, the other example that comes to mind, but he's going to be matched up against Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. He's going to need some help from Santi. He's going to need some help from Jay Huff. He's going to need some help from Zach Edey. And I think that's a big part of it. And then I'll touch on this part, and I'll pass it over to you. We know that Oklahoma City, right? Everyone talks about how Shai Gilgeous gets to the line, right? Oh, you gotta be careful guarding him. You gotta be careful guarding him. They foul a lot. Like OKC, there isn't a big free throw disparity in their direction because they foul a lot. And quite frankly, they're okay with that because they play such an aggressive brand of defense, and they will take the ball right out of your hands. And they have the Lou Dorts, the Jalen Williams of the world, the Cason Wallaces, a couple of those guys on the injury report, but Alex Caruso, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they have defensive playmakers. And that goes to the point you need your guards to be strong with the ball. Scottie Pippen Jr. is coming off a game where he had 10 assists and no turnovers. How close can he get to replicating that? He won't have 10 assists, no turnovers again, probably. But how close can you get to replicating that? Desmond Bane, look, you're a star in Memphis. Might not be a star nationally yet, but Desmond Bane is a star in Memphis. Be strong with the basketball. These guys are going to be all over you. I want to see Des have, I want to say, less than 4 turnovers. That would be a good ideal number for him. 3 turnovers against OKC, you can deal with it. Have less than 4 turnovers for Desmond Bane. Take care of the basketball. Luke Kennard, these are the games that Luke Kennard typically struggles in, right? We talk about how he shoots off against some of those other teams. I want to see Luke Kennard be strong with the ball, be aggressive in your shot hunting and things like that, because OKC is going to swarm these guys. This is the best team I've seen with the ability to collapse into the paint and then close out onto three-point shooters. You'll think that you got to look because the paint's covered, and then by the time the ball's out there, you need to be swinging the ball in a different direction. They cover a lot of space with those defenders that they have. So what you're going to need is a guy like Luke Kennard. He's going to have to be decisive. He's going to have to either shoot the basketball. He's going to have to be a 0.5 decision maker. Shoot the basketball, pass it, or dribble, past your defender and things like that. So it's going to be quick decisions. But the turnover number is going to be a big one, as well as the inside matchup.
Turnovers are huge. OKC wants to force them. Memphis at times can give them up pretty easily. Rebounding is a big thing for me. You mentioned the current starting lineup of Scottie Pippen Jr., Desmond Bane, Jalen Wells, Santi, and Jaren. They struggled to start the game against Utah. Utah was wide open from 3 a lot. I think Memphis also only got like 2 rebounds in the first 6 or 7 minutes of that game, if not a little bit longer than that. Rebounding has to be key. I'm not advocating for Zach Edey starting because, again, he looked good coming off of the bench. As long as he's getting his 20 or so minutes, I don't necessarily care if he starts or comes off as a reserve. I think that as a reserve, you get more out of him offensively. I think that's fair to say. But they have to prioritize rebounding. They have to. And I can't believe I'm about to say this. It makes me want to throw up in my mouth.
No, you're right.
That I am.
No, you're not. You're not
contemplating saying what I'm
about to say it.
But in fairness to me, Damichael Cole, whenever I make fun of John White Rice Conchar, what is the thing that I complain most about? He doesn't what?
Shoot the basketball.
And what did he do against the Utah Jazz?
He was letting it ride.
And he made, I think, 3 threes in that contest.
Mm-hmm.
So if that John Conchar shows up to Oklahoma City tonight,
put him on the floor.
And
put him on the floor.
Shoot some threes. I would start. John Conchar for Jalen Wells for the sake of rebounding, as long as he's going to shoot the ball, because he's going to be open. You're going to have Scottie Pippen Jr., who, if you watch any recent game film, you have to respect Scottie Pippen Jr. right now. He's playing well. Desmond Bane has respect at this stage. Jaren Jackson Jr. is an all-star. Santi Aldama, similar to Scottie, right? If you have been paying attention to the Grizzlies and you watch tape like NBA teams do, you know Aldama can play. Conchar is going to be open. And right now, Jalen Wells isn't hitting those shots. We know that John Conchar can rebound. I would start John Conchar.
Wow. I can't believe what I'm hearing right now.
Maybe that's a sign of desperation from me.
I mean,
it's possible.
I thought it would have been hard for you to say play him some more minutes, let alone put him in the starting lineup over all rookie guard Jalen Wells. I mean,
but he's struggling right now, Michael.
He is.
And I think that him going against reserves could give him some spark. He's been going against starters all season long. He certainly has hit the rookie wall. I don't have it in front of me. He might have played the most games of any member of the Memphis Grizzlies.
This is a tough game for some of those. Look, how to beat OKC, I think, is you not only have to have guys who can space the floor, which is why, again, you talk about Vince Williams Jr.'s, the Luke Kennards of the world, but you need guys who can be secondary playmakers. Like, that's an area where Jalen Wells hasn't really shown much just yet. He has been terrific all season as this 3-and-D guy, but we have not seen Jalen Wells really putting the ball on the floor, driving, nice dump off passes and things like that. That's something that comes, second, third year for some guys. But the Grizzlies need it now, especially when you're going against a team like OKC, because they identify those weaknesses. And like I said, they're going to close out space. And if you don't have the ability to attack those closeouts and become a playmaker, then they're just going to swarm you and take away whatever open look you think you have. And you're going to have to reset and run the possession again. And you're just not going to get a good look against this team.
Jalen Wells has absolutely played the most games of any Memphis Grizzlies player. The Grizzlies are 44-28. That means that they've played 72 games so far this season.
Good math, there you go.
Jalen Wells has played in 72 games. So Jalen Wells has played in every single game this season for the Memphis Grizzlies. This has to be easily the most basketball at the highest level, right? Because these guys play AAU games and play 4 games in a weekend. This is easily the most basketball he's played in his life for a consecutive stretch of months.
Yeah,
he has to be exhausted. I want it to be Vince Williams Jr. I'm not sure Vince Williams Jr. is ready yet. It's probably got to be John Conchar. Leave me alone. I'm not going to take any further questions on the matter. Let Damichael and I know how you're feeling about OKC Memphis. Again, the Grizzlies almost certain to be double-digit underdogs, if not a little bit lower than that. But there's a path, and if the Grizzlies can find a way to upset the Thunder, that certainly makes up for some of the lesser losses at the start of this road trip. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Tomorrow, I will have you solo on a Gotta Get Down on Friday edition of the show, talking Grizzlies-Thunder. Damichael, it's going to be fun. I'm going to miss you, of course, as I always do. Miss you terribly. But I'm looking forward to talking Grizzlies-Thunder and then looking ahead to, I tend to speak in hyperbole, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, regular season games in the last couple of years. Grizzlies-Lakers Saturday night in Memphis. You'll be there in person, I'm sure. Going to be a massive game. I'm excited to talk about that with everybody tomorrow, too.
I'm excited to hear you talk about it, Joe. And it's going to be a big one. That's a statement game. Like, that's how you, even if things don't go great against Oklahoma City, that's how you get the sour taste out your mouth pretty quickly for the Grizzlies. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about those 2 games, in the next couple of days.
I'll talk more about it on tomorrow's show. For all the love that Luka and LeBron get in this new look Lakers team, if you actually look at their numbers and their record over the last 7
they ain't
games,
wilding anybody.
They ain't doing much better than Memphis. So it's not like the Lakers are coming in to Memphis on some heater or anything like that. It is going to be an interesting game. Probably a lot of Lakers fans in the building. I would imagine Luka's first trip to FedEx Forum as a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. Going to be fun to preview and review Grizzlies-Thunder on tomorrow's show. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Make Damichael and I a part of your everyday Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. And also make sure you're checking out LockedOnDaily.com, our free daily newsletter. Grizzlies words from me, NBA analysis, fantasy basketball advice, and so much more. LockedOnDaily.com. Go and subscribe if you haven't already done so. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Enjoy Grizzlies-Thunder. Fingers crossed that we're talking about a win on our Friday. Got to get down on Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Until then, have a good one. Be safe out there.